Okay, so here we are. The BAE 146 has finally been released for Microsoft Flight Simulator. And we have it parked here on the ground at London Stansted Airport. And I thought it might be worth taking it for a quick circuit. We're not going to follow a big flight plan or anything. Just to see the basic operation of the plane and just show that even beginners can actually use this aircraft and make use of it. So we jump inside the aircraft. It's a bit of a throwback, this aircraft, to a time before glass cockpits. This is showing one that's been retrofitted with a flight management computer, but the early versions of this aircraft didn't have that. So the pilots would fly by VOR navigation, radio navigation. So let's get it powered up. So to show today that you can use this even if you're not a practiced simulator enthusiast or aviation enthusiast, there are various features in this to help you out. So at the bottom of the tablet in the cockpit, you can click on the aircraft screen. And this pulls up this view of the aircraft. I'm just going to go and make sure actually before we get going that I've configured my controls to suit this aircraft. I'll explain why in a few moments. So we're just going to go and change this to match, I've got a 4-engine mapping, which I'm going to change over to. I'm just flicking through the aircraft. I wish this was a drop down. So if anyone from Asobo sees this, please, please, please implement drop downs in the controller profiles. Apply, go back, resume. Okay, so what I was doing there was making sure that my throttle levers are mapped correctly so that they travel correctly on the screen here. So actually they're not moving at all at the moment, which is kind of worrying. We've got there's a good reason for that, which we will get to later, but you have to unlock them. But we don't have to, and I'm going to show you why. But I was just making sure that once they are freed up, they will move correctly. Okay, so you have a option called states for the entire aircraft. So you can get the entire aircraft ready to fly by just saying, get me to ready for takeoff states. So if we click that.
Ready for takeoff selected.
So you'll see that all sorts of things have come to life. And if you look closely here, you will see the engines start to come to life as well. If you look down here, you can see you'll see these throttles moving slowly. So at the moment we're waiting for the auxiliary power unit to kick in. If we look up overhead, you can see the APU has climbed up to 90%. And if we look down here now, you can see suddenly the throttles are moving. This is the aircraft's doing this entirely on its own. So if you are a beginner with this kind of thing, this is invaluable because this means you can start the aircraft without really knowing what you're doing. And then bit by bit you can learn the systems by reading. It comes with copious documentation, it's worth pointing out. So bit by bit you can go and learn all of those systems and do it all yourself from cold and dark, which I will be doing in later videos, but I need to learn that too. I've got a fair idea already, so it kind of follows the same path that you would follow with most aircraft, where you get the auxiliary power unit up and running, or you get the electric first with the batteries, then the auxiliary power unit, then you configure the air and the fuel pumps, and then you spin the engines up and ignite them. Then you turn the crossfeed over so the engines are providing the electricity. Interestingly, in the 146 it would appear you leave the APU on when you're in flight, you don't remove it. Because it appears that the APU powers the air conditioning packs. Okay, should we just shut those alarms off so they don't keep beeping while the aircraft's firing up? You will see the throttles moving forwards over the next couple of minutes. So number 3 is now spinning up. So engine number 4, it spins up the engines in reverse order, so you get 4, 3, 2 and 1, and that corresponds outside with 4, 3, 2 and 1, so you can see number 1 isn't spinning yet, but the others are. This has to be one of the most beautiful aircraft in terms of modelling in the simulator so far, if not the best. Inside the cockpit it's absolutely brilliant, and it kind of, there's some history to this airframe, isn't there? So I have no doubt that they've actually photographed one of the real ones, probably from a museum somewhere, because it's just too good. If you click, the yoke can be removed with a lever over here, and the little panel here will get rid of the tablet out of the way. So if you don't want the tablet in your way, it will disappear. Okay, so we'll get the yoke out of the way as well, so we can see what we're doing. We can control whether we can see another co-pilot. If we go and pull up the tablet again, I believe it's going to be in here somewhere. So settings, notes, aircraft, excuse me, charts, or maybe not. Maybe it's in the payload. Anyway, so we're just waiting for the engines to come up. I think they're all pretty much up now. Okay, so today we are going to do a very simple route around the airfield, and to do that we are going to make sure that the navigation is set to nav and not RNAV. So you find various elements in this aeroplane of its history where things have been retrofitted in, like the flight management system, but they actually make no sense anymore. Or to some of the symbology around the switches, it doesn't actually make any sense. So RNAV actually relates to FMS in terms of a modern aircraft, to the flight management system. Okay, let's have a look. We are going to go and trundle out to the flight line and take off. So the aircraft has been got ready for us. It's ready for takeoff now. We can have a quick look round now and make sure that our controls work. So that's the throttles. Obviously we saw the yokes move around. We can see that the pedals are moving, and we can see, if we look outside, let's have a look at the control movements. So got ailerons, got the tail. Now it's a bit unique on this aircraft. It looks like it's got a lot of elevator deflection until we get out to the runway, and then once we start moving that will flatten out all on its own. Okay, so let's just quickly scroll across here, go to aircraft, and we'll remove the chocks that we saw earlier. I think I've already removed them. Well, I have now. And remove the parking brakes, and we're rolling. So we're going to go out to runway 22 at Stansted. It's a lovely sunny day in London. We picked the right day to do this. It's a busy weekend for Flight Simulator this weekend, because not only has the BA-146 been released, the MD-80 has been released from Leonardo as well. So you can get the 146 from JustFlight, and you can get the MD-80 from Leonardo, as I said, or Sim Market are selling it on behalf of Leonardo. I'll be doing a video in the MD-80 as well at some point, but I need to learn it a bit more. I've had a play with it already. It's a bit steeper learning curve than the 146. For some reason the sim has started stuttering there for a few seconds. Oh, it's because it's loading in that 747, I imagine. Okay, so we're going to move flaps to takeoff position on the way along the taxiway here. We'll get rid of that tablet out of the way. So it's going to be a very simple flight, just flying around Stansted. So you can see there's a heading bug here, and it corresponds with the marker on the CDI down here, the course deviation indicator. It's preset to the runway direction of Stansted, which is really handy. Okay, we're pretty much ready to go. I'm just looking on the instruments. We've got an altitude over here, which we can set to, say, 2,500 feet would be enough for us today. We are going to use vertical speed to get there, but it doesn't work quite how you'd imagine. We're also going to use heading mode, which is over here. So this is the Autopilot master control panel, by the way. And we switch the Autopilot on and off with the button on my controller, not with the Autopilot button up here. Okay. Just center the view up, move the view down a little bit so at least we can see the instruments. Just check the volume levels while we're doing this to see how loud I am over the aircraft. And we need to turn that down a bit now, so you can at least hear me over it.
V1. Rotate. V2. Positive rate of climb. Gear up.
Gear up. Going through 160 knots. Okay, so I'm going to engage autopilot. So it's going to maintain the vertical speed at the point we engage the autopilot. So you see the vertical speed is dipping, but then it will come back. Because remember, this is a gyro, so it takes a while to stabilise. Well, actually no, it's not doing that, look. It's going to 0. So what we're going to do is disengage vertical speed, then come off the throttles before we get too fast. And we're going to move the flight director up, and then save vertical speed. And you can see now, we've gone for about 1,000 feet a minute, which is good. So this will happily climb out now at the vertical speed we have set to the heading we have set. Remember, the heading was over here. So this is all very mechanical compared to modern glass cockpits, but it's the same principles, kind of. So, you know, we're not choosing a vertical speed and the aeroplane gets to it. We demonstrate a vertical speed to the autopilot and say, copy that please. Okay, so while we are climbing out, we will turn now to the reciprocal of 225. It's going to be 45. Whoops, it's got a little bit too far. And we'll have a look outside the aircraft. We need to go and turn off the landing lights. They were turned on when we configured the aeroplane for takeoff. And there we go, we're just gently climbing out. There's the airfield in the background. And this is the 146. It's absolutely gorgeous. It flies like a dream. The avionics takes some learning, and the switch gear in the cockpit has a law all unto itself. It's very, very different than modern aircraft, but the principles are the same. The Nav Radios are very easy to use. You'll notice, yeah, you haven't got your big moving map or anything, so you're having to navigate. But it does have this FMS that was retrofitted into the 146 late in its life, and it's very, very similar to the Boeing flight management computers. So obviously we haven't programmed a route in, we're just flying manually. But if we had, then we could get it to follow the route with LNAV mode, and by switching this master switch for the autopilot over to RNAV instead of NAV. NAV mode basically means use the VOR radios. Okay, we're just coming up to 3,000. Actually, I forgot to arm the altitude I wanted to go for. So it's gone straight through it. So we'll move that up for 3,000. Yeah, we climbed through 3,000 now as well. So we'll go back to altitude hold mode, which is fine. So it will hold the altitude at the point it was activated. What we could do is arm 3,000. Yeah, it's too close to the altitude we're at to be able to arm it. What we could do is arm it if it was significantly different, then set vertical speed using the trim knob and then engage vertical speed. So if we have a look at a little nav map just to see what we're doing here, we've taken off, we've done a reciprocal route. The wind is pushing us slightly away from the direction of the runway, but it's not really a big problem. Now we're getting an overspeed warning. This aircraft's very powerful, so I'll cut the engines back. If you can see down here, the needle for the speed is just touching on the edge of overspeeding. We've just corrected that, so we're good to go. So what we're going to do is fly basically up to the end of the feathers, turn back in and come in on the runway 22 at Stansted. There's a slight tailwind, it's only a couple of knots wind, it's not going to make any difference to us. 110.50 on Nav 1. So on the Nav Radios you can select which one you want to tune. 110.50 is already tuned in on pre. So there's pre and active, and you can flick over them by pressing this button, which makes them obviously makes this instrument reflect that frequency, the top frequency, the active frequency. So we need to change the course to match the runway direction, which is 223 degrees. So we come over here, and you can see a course knob here. You can spin that round, and you can see the CDI is moving, the course deviation indicator is moving as we do that. So 223 degrees. So there we go. So obviously it's the opposite direction than the direction we are going. That's fine. Let's just check the volume levels. Yep, that's looking good. So you can hear me over the top of it. Okay. So I'm just showing you the very basics to navigate around using radio and bits and pieces of the autopilot, but by no means all of it. This aircraft is a bit of a monster. So you can see there's an awful lot around the cockpit that you can see, and look above. Oh my word. There are nice views to help you skim around the cockpit to get to the various switch panels. And it all kind of does make some sense, but it's going to take some time to learn, and there's very good documentation. I have to say, very good documentation comes with it. So don't be concerned about, the learning curve. Okay, we were just going to have a little look at a little nav map. So we'll turn back round now. We'll tell this to come back down to 2,500. Is that enough of a disparity from where we are to let it go into vertical speed mode? So we turn off. There we go. So we're just going to gently come down. So what I did there, I disabled the altitude hold, used the trim to repoint the aircraft downwards, and then pressed vertical speed to get it to maintain the amount I was descending, which was only a little bit, but it means we'll just gently come down to 2,500 feet as we make the turn. So we're going to turn back towards 45 degrees. But if you look at the map, we actually want to be slightly, 225, not 45. We actually want to be slightly more than that because we need to re-intercept. So what am I doing? That needs to be 225. That's the runway direction for the radio, for the CDI. Heading we need to change. So heading is indicated by the little marker which is pointing exactly the opposite direction. It was the runway takeoff direction we originally had. So we want to turn the aircraft around. Remember, it's in heading mode on the autopilot, so it's copying it. So we'll spin it round. Whoops, the mouse has just missed the knob. We'll spin that round to about 235, which gives us 10 degrees intercept angle on the glide slope. Now you will notice already, because this is tuned into an ILS frequency, not only do we have our horizontal position relative to the aircraft, we also have vertical position of the glide slope. So we have localizer and glide slope in operation. So it might look a little bit different than you're used to seeing it, but it's the same instrumentation really. Okay, so let's come off the speed. We're going far too fast below 10,000 feet, by the way. But again, this is just a demonstration flight. So I'll cut the engines back to idle, so we'll lose speed during the turn. See the aircraft is busy turning. It's stabilised out. Oh, actually it's carried on down. I forgot to arm again the altitude, so I'm going to go to altitude hold instead. So it just shows there's a learning curve with these aircraft, and you really do have to kind of build into your muscle memory what to do. I should have set the altitude and then armed that altitude, and I didn't. So the aircraft just carried on vertical speed straight through the target altitude because it wasn't armed. Okay, so now this makes more sense. We are flying towards, if you imagine the center line is kind of somewhere there-ish. We're flying towards it, so which you can see here. Flying towards it, it's off to our right. This will come back towards us, so let's turn at a sharp angle towards it to see that happen. So if we turn our compass direction to 245 degrees, we're turning into the line. So relative to us, this is the line. This is our course line of 225 degrees, which is the same as the runway direction. If we zoom in and look down here, oh, it's 223 it should be actually, look. 223. So we'll correct that. So on the course up here, change that to 223. So this represents the line of the runway. Obviously the runway is over here compared to us, but we're off to the right. We're off to the left. We're coming back towards it. So this line is starting to move, if we look carefully, which means we're getting closer to it. So we are going to adjust our heading now to come back in towards it. So we'll move the heading bug round. And you can actually see Stansted out in front of us, but it's quite nice to follow the plot. We're down to about 200 knots, so let's turn off the autopilot now and let's fly this thing ourselves. So should we sit up in the cockpit so we get a nice view on the way in, but also pan the view down so we get to see the instruments. So I am now flying, I'll prove that. Roll the ailerons around. Okay, so at the moment we are below the glide slope, so let's open the engine slightly and climb. And you can see now the needle is coming down, meaning we're getting closer. There's an invisible line through the sky. We're below it, but we're getting closer to the underneath of it. And that line descends all the way down to the end of the runway. Okay, so we're just straightening up. So, gear back down. Go and have a look outside, we can see the gear coming out. It's an amazingly modelled aircraft, isn't it?
Speed checked below 205. Select flaps 18.
Okay, so flaps now. You can hear the noise of the wind hitting those flaps, and the reason for that is this aircraft has an enormous wing area. Okay, so we are now above the glide slope. So to counter that, we're going to dive. And I kind of did this on purpose so you get to see this. Look behind the aircraft and watch the speed brakes. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So the tail opens up. We're now able to come down very, very steeply without gaining too much speed. Go for full flaps. Take the speed brake back off. And we're coming back down, so watching the indicator down here for the glide slope. We want to stay above 140 knots ideally on approach, so I'm just accelerating ever so slightly to get us above 140. Okay, so we sit back down in the cockpit. Move our view back up. Off to the left. So we'll just correct for that. A little bit high.
500.
A bit of turbulence actually over the end of the field. It's quite marked turbulence. So we're down to about 130 knots. We've got full flaps, remember.
Fifteen, 14, 13, 20, 10.
Ground idle.
And we're down. Not the smoothest landing ever, but it all comes with practice.
Wing pressure seen.
So, wheel brakes on. And we'll take the
80
high
knots.
speed exit.
60 knots.
And we slow right down. And there we go. So obviously as we taxi in, we can go and turn those taxi lights. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn the landing lights on. Oh my word. This is the problem. You're trying to communicate and do everything at once. You make multiple mistakes. I'm doing this without a checklist or anything as well. So I really should have switched those landing lights on approach, and I didn't. But it gives you an idea. Even if you're a beginner with flight simulation, the BAE 146 is a proper study level aircraft, but it gives you various advantages through the tablet in the cockpit to be able to assist you in getting the thing up and running, and then you only have to worry about a minimal set of things like, you know, controlling the autopilot and navigating. And you can start off by doing altitude and heading navigation, and then you can move on to programming the flight management computer, switching over the guidance system and using LNAV and VNAV, which is lateral and vertical navigation obviously. But yeah, I think the 146 is absolutely fantastic, and I will be flying it a lot in the coming weeks and months. It's kind of the three aircraft everybody's been waiting for in flight sim. Was this, the MD-80 and the 737, and apparently the 737 is coming at the end of this week. I'm not quite sure how authoritative that prediction is, but a friend of a friend has read it somewhere apparently. So, okay, I'm not going to continue this all the way back into the actually no, let's go and park up, then I can show you some last few bits and pieces. There's ladders and doors and all kinds of things that are simulated. It's actually really very, very good. So these aircraft were used for short city hops. They're all out of service now. They used to operate out of London City, a lot of them. And they were apparently they were very popular in the US as well. I've been told that this morning by somebody, so I didn't actually know that. But there was a subsequent version of this. So the BAE 146 was the first version, and then there was the RJ series, which followed on, which were massively upgraded apparently. We've got some scenery issues today. Look, the jetways are not drawing. How strange. Okay, let's go and just park over here on the concrete, and then I can show you some of the extra features. Okay, your parking brake's on. So to shut the engines off, literally all you have to do is go and
cabin crew, doors to manual and test check.
so if we turn that tablet back on, we can come out here and we can say we want to put the chocks back in place. So we can see that happen, and we now have chocks have been put on the back wheels. We can have the ground power attached. We can see that's now attached outside. We can have the forward passenger door opened, and that's now happened. I mean, look at the quality of the modelling. It's absolutely spectacular. Now we can have the stairs. So this is really cool. Here they come. And let me just shut the alarm off. It's warning us that we've lost power basically because the engines have shut. It's forward service hatch, forward cargo, aft service hatch, aft passenger hatch. So if we have a look at that, we've got all the doors are open now all the way around. We can actually see all the way through the aircraft. Rather intriguingly now, we can go to the drone camera. And you can see not only is the aircraft actually completely modelled inside and out, absolutely spectacular, but yeah, the quality of the modelling is unreal. It's one of the best models I've seen in the simulator, without question. Absolutely spectacular, really. Okay, so that's the BAE 146. We did a quick circuit of Stansted with it there on this nice sunny afternoon in London. It's a fantastic plane. If you can afford it, please go get it. It will teach you so much about kind of the history of aviation more than anything. But it's really rather good. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. That was the BAE 146. You can get it from JustFlight.com. And it's worth pointing out, I've bought it with my own money. Got no connection with JustFlight. So I'll see you all again soon.